I always refer to you like I tell you, but I've got a couple mentors in life, a lot of which are business related, some are financial related. There's really only like one that I know personally that I refer to as like a life mentor, and that's you. There's people that, I learn a lot from in business and I learn a lot from in finance. But you're really the only person that I know that I call a life mentor. And that started, I think it was my sophomore year as a speech class. Pretty sure it was sophomore year speech class, because the next year I made sure the next 2 years I had a minimum 2 different hours during the day where I was in your classroom. But it was a speech class, which for me, for most kids, like having a public speaking class is not exactly things that they're excited about. But for whatever reason, I really loved it. I remember my first speech was how music affected basically every situation. I came up with a guitar and then I played different music. And but very quickly, we connected on the music level, and then we connected just overall. You just started to say things in class the way that you taught, the way that you taught kids. And then I started meeting a bunch of other kids. They're like, yeah, Mr. Gloff, Mr. Gloff, Mr. Gloff. And so the reason that, I wanted to have you on is for a number of different reasons. One, I think right now in the stage that the world is in, it's never been harder to be an educator. In my opinion, I don't know if that's true, but that's my guess outside looking in. Number two, I think that teachers need to be appreciated more for what they do, because there's so much that you guys do, and especially in the world that we're in, that there's something that there's something someone could get from this conversation. But also, I think the biggest value that people would get is just talking about your life philosophies, because that's what it's done for me as a person, and as a dad, as a father, as a Christ follower. All of these things, you've changed my life in so many ways, and I talk to so many people who say the exact same thing. I just, for some reason, got lucky and blessed that we have a good relationship. So now I get to talk to you 10 years after high school and sit here with you. So first off, thank you for everything you've done.
It's
but
nice.
that period of time in high school with you was a very, and I'll get to some questions, but like, it's just a very weird time for kids. Is high school, right?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of sense of like direction and guidance that I felt like I got from you, and certainty in like who I was and who I wanted to be and so on from your teaching. So I say this to a lot of people. You could have done I literally feel like you could do anything in life, anything. Like, it does not matter what it was. And I remember there was one day, I think it was the end of my junior year. There was, it might've been the CCR class, but, where we gave you some sort of card, something. And, I watched you sit there tearing up reading it. And then it was the last day of school. You were drained shortly after everything that happened with your second son. Just life was crazy. And I remember you just sitting there tearing up reading the card, and you were saying, this is why I do this. That was what you said. But you could have done anything, and you do a lot. You could have gone somewhere in the business world and made so much money. You could have done all of these different things, but you chose to be a teacher, and you still to this day choose to teach and to help kids. And I'm just wondering, why did you start an education, and then still to this day now, when you literally could do anything, why do you still do this?
Yeah. So the story is actually simpler and less about me than probably less romantic, but I told you the story, but I've never thought about becoming a teacher ever. Like, there was never, ever one moment in grade school, middle school, or high school that I was sitting there going, yeah, I'm going to go into education. I do remember once being in a classroom, it was geography, sophomore year, and this really cool teacher, he was actually my 7th grade basketball coach at the middle school, but he was a high school teacher, and his name was Mr. Miller. And I just remember saying, I don't want to be a teacher, but if I ever was, that this is the guy I would be.
Like Mr. Miller.
This would be him, right? I would be him. And he was younger, and he had some health issues, and that was kind of a stumbling road for him at one point. And I lost track of him and not really sure how that worked out. But that's all I remember. And I went to college with dreams and goals and thoughts, pretty clear idea of who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And I graduated and got a Joe job and was not happy in that role. And I tried another job and I wasn't happy in that role. And then one day out of the blue, now this, you got to remember, this is pre-cell phones. This is pre-internet, right? This is 1994.
That's the year I was born.
Yeah, it's like 1994. And I am at home and the phone rings at a weird time of day for this type of call. It was like 6:30, 7 o'clock. And it was this guy who was a chair of a English department at Andrean High School. And his name was Ray DeFabio. And he called me and said, hey, Chris Gloff, this is Chris Gloff. I said, yeah. He goes, my name is Ray DeFabio. I'm the department chair at Andrean High School. And we have an opening right now for a long-term sub. I was wondering if you had an interest in filling it. And I didn't even know how to answer that. I was like, what is a long-term sub? When I heard sub, that completely and quickly conjured up negative connotations. I knew I didn't want to be that. And I just said, no, thank you. I said, no, I'm not a teacher. And they're like, yeah, we know you're not a teacher, but we're wondering if you want to be a long-term sub. And I said, no, I appreciate it, but thanks very much. I hung up with them and that was that. And I didn't even think about it again. And then 2 weeks later, he called me again. And he asked me the same question. And he said, I know you'd said no, but I'd like to give you more information about it. So he started telling me about it. I said, okay, hold on. How did you get my number? Like, why me? And he said, well, honestly, there was a teacher that we used to have, and she just left for a different job. She moved away. But you went to high school with her daughter, and she said that she thought you would be a good teacher someday. Now, I'm 23 or 24 years old at this point, right? And the last thing I want to hear is I'm going to go back to school and become a teacher. Yeah, right. I'm going to be a good teacher. And so I said, hey, I really appreciate that. That's really nice. And I knew who the woman was he was talking about, and she was a sweet lady. And I just said, I just have no interest. I said, I wish I could help you. And he goes, all right, appreciate your time. So I saw my dad the next day or so, and I said, I've been getting these weird phone calls. And he's like, what is it? So I told him, and my dad said, that's interesting. And I said, why is it interesting? He goes, I always thought you'd be a good teacher. And I'm like, and you're telling me this now? Like you had all these opportunities. And so I said, okay, well, that's interesting. I said, why would it be a good teacher? He goes like, well, you have a good personality. You explain things well, you break things down. You don't think of everything in an analytical way. You just think about it in a practical way. And I thought, that's interesting. So now this is floating in my brain. And this guy who's, my role model, my dad, is telling me that he thought I should have done this the whole time. And, 2 weeks later, the phone rings again. And
same guy?
Yeah, same guy, Ray. And he says,
you're a good salesman.
Yeah, right. He said, look, man, I'm going to be honest with you. We need a warm body here. And he's like, what? And I'm just thinking, like, what did you think happened the change in my life 2 weeks ago that would make me want to do it now? And like, what's the sales pitch? You need someone? Like, and I said, okay, look, I'll come out and I'll talk to you. And I literally walked through the doors for this not interview, whatever it was. And I knew right then, like I walked in, and I've always been this, I like to take broken down things and make them shiny. And that it was kind of a broken down thing. It was an old building that had a lot of potential, and their programs and stuff there, which at that time I didn't even know what I was going to teach or what was going to happen. So anyway, I long story short, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. So I quit my job, and I meet with the principal of the school, and he's a priest. And the first thing he does is he hands me the catechism. I'm not Catholic. I was christened Catholic as a young child, but I wasn't a practicing Catholic. I'd been in the Protestant church, and I was like, what is this? And he's like, you're going to want to read through that. And he's just this really fun dude. He's like, Mr. Gloff. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you're going to want to read through this. And I was like, this guy's a character from a Seth MacFarlane show. And so I was like, okay. I said, what do you need a teacher for? And he's like, well, we've got 2 classes. One is drama, and the other one is reading comprehension. And I said, what is that? He goes, these are low-level students who have low literacy skills, but they're going to Andrean, and we want to bolster their reading. So I took the job, and I start right away, and I walk into the classroom. I said, okay, what are we reading? And they hand me this workbook with just bad reading. Remember like English when it was the workbook days? We don't have those anymore, by the way. But the workbooks, and you open them up, and it was a story about, something that happened on the Sudan River, and I just couldn't connect with it because I didn't even know where the Sudan River was, right? And so, and you could tell these kids weren't going to read it.
So you haven't gone to school to be a teacher?
No.
You're just walking in.
Yeah.
Okay.
They didn't do any reading. Like one kid shut the book and put his head down and started sleeping. Another kid pretended like he was reading it, like this, and his eyes were closing. And I thought, how do you help kids learn how to read if they don't even want to read what's in front of them? And there's a million read. I now know, it's a brick wall, right? If they can't understand what they're reading, why would they want to read it? If they don't connect with what they're reading, why would they want to read it? And there was just a million things going on. So back then there were bookstores around like Barnes and Nobles and Borders. And so on the way home from Andrean to where I lived in Munster at the time, there was a Borders bookstore, and I ran in there and I just thought, okay, children's book? No, that's going to humiliate them that I'm bringing in a children's book. And I just was like looking around the store, and my head was spinning. Like I just thought, what am I doing? I'm out of my league here. And I turned around and I saw a magazine rack, and there was some music magazines and some car mechanic magazines and some Hollywood, entertainment magazines. I thought, all right. So I walked over and I picked it up, and there was this cool article on Chuck D from Public Enemy, who was, kind of a huge voice in hip hop back then. And the article was written by a really good writer who dusted in a couple of really tough vocab words. But if you read around it,
you could understand.
You could infer, right? I didn't even know what that was back then. And so I brought it to school, and I said, okay, give me the workbooks. And I took the workbooks and I threw them in the garbage can. And they all looked at me like, whoa. And I was like, and of course,
respect,
I'm 24. I'm like trying to be cool, right? That's my first mistake. And so they said, well, what are we going to read? And I open my backpack and I take out these magazines, and they still didn't know what to do with that. Like, okay, what's he doing here? And so they sat down and they started to read. And I watched them like get into it. And I watched one guy, like he was literally trying to sound it out. He's like, wanderlust. I was like, that's a pretty tricky word. And I said, can you infer what it means? And so we started having this dialogue. We started talking, and I started to connect with them on a different level. Now, I don't want to cloud this and make, I like when I was younger, it was important for me to think that, for people to think that I always had it together. It's still important. Who am I kidding? It's still important for me. Like I always want to have this perception, but now it comes with a lot more guilt. I don't want students or anyone, proteges. I don't want anyone to look at me and go, this guy's got it all together, because that would be the farthest from the truth. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of joy, but to be human is to experience pain and to live with suffering and pain. It just is. Like if anybody tells you I have no pain or no suffering in my life, they're lying. My experience is telling me that you're lying, because we all suffer with frailties and with insecurities, and then it branches out from troubles in relationships to troubles the way we're perceived, all sorts of stuff. So I don't want people to think that I was magical and everything from then on was perfect, because other issues arose. But over this process of 2 to 3 years, I got a sense that I was pretty good at this. And at that same time, the thing I was really passionate about, which was music, that position opened up in the school. Somebody who, I mean, so like think about this, man. All these doors are just opening, and I'm really have nothing to do with it. I really don't. And all I had was a hard work ethic, and I liked being around students. And I still to this day, I love when a kid surprises you and the light bulb goes on or something magical happens that they get it and they look at you like there's no word spoken. There's never any word spoken. You know, that card you were talking about, it wasn't about the fact that on the card you guys were saying, Mr. Gloff, thank you, you know, this and that and that. What it was about was that there was a connection of 10 people in that room, a really small group of people that got along with each other and worked with each other and collaborated with each other. You know, this, my son's writing a ton of college essays and stuff. And I'm watching this boy kind of cross a bridge very slowly, mind you, to adulthood. And he's created, you know, he wants some independence but yet he doesn't know how to get it. And yet he's afraid to go and get that independence. But he's trying to figure out his place in this world and what the world perceives of him. Right. He doesn't like to be told that, well, I mean, I'm sure he likes to be told that he does things well and whatnot, but sometimes he doesn't believe it. But one of the things that we've stumbled upon is this American filmmaker. Her name is Ava DuVernay. And she has this quote. She says, "If your dream only includes you, it's too small." I didn't know. I wouldn't have known that, you know, it was my wife who kind of brought it to Christopher and I. And that's what happened in that classroom, man. In that classroom that day was that the dream wasn't just me anymore. It was the 10 of you and all of us that we had done some incredibly fun stuff that year. That year was just, it's never been the same. Like if I tried to replicate it, which is my biggest mistake, it'll never be the same. And that's kind of like with teaching too. Like whatever I did in that room with those kids that day, it wouldn't have the same effect. Right. So why am I here? Okay. That's how I got there. And then I had a span of 14 years in that career at that school, building up a music and theater program, building a recording studio. Everything that I had at Crown Point with you is because I had figured it out there. And I cut through the woods and built a road and then said, okay, now I'm at a school where I don't have to beg, borrow, and steal to get everything. Like we have some money that we could kind of do some stuff. But the building is still the same, right? Like we did that then and that was very cool. But like, I was always looking at what's the next thing, like, okay, the radio, the TV thing, and then the radio station and all that stuff. So, but I think the thing that you brought up is like, it's a really tricky time right now. There's a lot of questioning of everything in our society, whether it's politics or religion or gender or gun laws or women's rights, you know, racism. I mean, the police. Sometimes it makes my head want to explode. But man, that's even more of a reason that we need really good teachers to connect. But I am concerned, and I don't want to be the old guy, which is what I'm turning into, that's saying, you know, the sky is falling, and nothing. Because my experience is that the world is kind of a cleansing pond. You know, it goes through tough times and then it rectifies itself. It's kind of like when Yellowstone Park had forest fires and trees that were huge and big were burnt up in the forest fires, and it was reduced to ashes and rubble. And people were like, this is a national treasure. How could we have let this happen? And scientists who knew better were out there studying and looking and studying. And they said, this is a natural phenomenon. This has happened many times before in its past. In order to build new, you have to burn it down.
There's a quote from a mentor of mine that I've only met once before, but he's a business mentor of mine, and also in ways like a lot of life stuff. But he has this quote he talks about. He said, "Tough times breed strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create bad times." And I think we're in a period of time where it's so easy to be American. And that's not, I'm not saying every person, I'm just saying in general, even the lowest portions of America have a lot more than a lot of the world.
Oh, without doubt.
So we're talking Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're talking food, water, shelter.
Yeah.
A large portion of this country has that at the bare minimum.
Yeah.
So what's happened is, but a large portion of America is living well beyond every other portion of the world. And America's gotten to a point where everything in general, not everybody, I'm not blanket statementing, but what I am saying is for the most part, it's pretty easy to live here. It's pretty easy compared to most places, and it's created a lot of very weak people in a lot of different ways, and it's a very tough time for kids, man, to grow up.
Yeah, and I think that, like I came here today, I was parking the car, I'm like, I'm just getting ready, we're going to laugh for the next hour. We're not laughing at all. The three people that have tuned in to watch this old geezer teacher are like, oh man, this guy's bumming me out. But the reality is this, like, we live in a very complex society, and everybody thinks that they have the opinion of what it takes to what people need in their lives. I do not. Like, I agree. Like you say, like we have more than a lot of other countries, but like the people who have nothing in this country look at me and just say, "Don't tell me like you know where 100%, I'm at," you know. 100%. And
that's why I wanted to be careful saying
with a woman,
saying everybody,
with a woman who might be struggling, with a mom who might be struggling with a child to make ends meet, or somebody told me years ago that when you go into Chicago and you see all the homelessness and whatnot, that those people have brought those things upon themselves. A lot of people think that those people have brought those situations upon themselves. And then I read and heard from another person that a large number of homeless people were living normal lives like you and I, and then had mental illness or a drug addiction, or they lost their job and were embarrassed by it, and they literally just left. Yeah. And it would be, I think it'd be really easy to say, well, that person just has a weak soul. Man, I don't know. There's a lot of people in this world who I think are very strong people, but an unfortunate circumstance has left them in a position where they're hopeless. Yeah. And the only difference between hopeless and homeless is one letter. Mm-hmm. Just one letter, man. Yeah. And it's easy to see how people can fall down those trails really quickly. Yeah. So I think we need good teachers, but we're living in a time where there's not a desire for people to go into it, because who wants to go into a career and be questioned every time? If I was a doctor and the world had access to WebMD, and now people are coming into my office after I've had 12 years of training and residencies, telling me like, I read on WebMD that this might be, and like, I think that person has that right to be an advocate, because that's the other thing, like medicine and insurance and everything has become so complex that in order for you to get the treatment you need, sometimes you have to advocate for yourself. I think of how difficult it was to watch my parents towards the end of their lives, deal, like when they were finding out the results of tests and stuff like that, they didn't understand what the doctors were saying. I had to get them in the car and then explain. I said, the doctor says that you have cancer and blah, and all that stuff. And I never ever once as a kid, nobody ever said, be prepared. Someday you might have to be the translator to your parents for the end of their life, for the demise of their life. If somebody would said that to me, I would have been done right there. Like, get me out of here. But life has a way of giving you what hopefully you can handle in amounts, not for everyone, but in my case, it's certainly been the case. And and you kind of figure that out. But when I started teaching, there are great people coming out of pedagogy, training and out of schools, and we don't see that as much anymore. This high. I work with incredibly bright, gifted, passionate people, but it's not the same numbers.
Not as many people coming through.
And I think
I don't blame.
No. Like somebody said, does your son ever think about going into teaching? And I said, I hope not. It's hard because I think it's a noble profession, and I think that I would love to see him. I think he'd be great at it, and I've told him that. But I don't. I don't want. I don't know. We don't know where this road's going right now, and I hope that we kind of, as a culture and as a society, as a government, as a nation, as a world, figure out like what is the best way. Because we could talk for days. Like just miles away from here, there's somebody that doesn't have the same access to education 100%. That we have here, and what's going to close? That's we used to refer to that as the achievement gap. And, that we're achieving at this rate, and those schools may be achieving, but maybe only at this rate. So we're still spreading out, which has an effect on socioeconomic status, which has an effect on the classes. So if we're trying to, make, my vision is like in a world where we have as much as we have, like you just said, right? Why can't we all hope for just and fruitful lives for all people? But it's a competition, and I'm as guilty of it as anybody else. Like whether it's school and grades or travel ball or whatever, it's like, who's going to get that scholarship? Who's going to get this award? Who's going to get that? Who's going to get? And it's become more about that. And there's fewer, from my perception and my experience, there's less people that are rooting for other people. And that's like, I'm fortunate. I have these friends, these two good friends who genuinely want goodness for me. I said to one of them this past year, I said, how can you be so good to me? Which sounds like a weird thing that two men would say to each other. And I would say, how could you be so kind? And he says, it's easy to root for people you love. Mm-hmm. That's what he said to me. And I just was like stopped in my tracks. Because I wouldn't have expected it from this guy. But, he put into words like, and I think maybe that's the root of it, is that we've lost love, our genuine love for all of humanity as a whole. We've become kind of more inward visions than outward vision. And I think in order to get education righted, we have to get to that. And then we have to get people to believe in that again. Do I think it will happen? I do. The optimist, the eternal optimist in me says it will turn its way around, but I think it's going to get darker before it gets lighter.
Yeah. So to sum up, why even to this day you're still doing it is it was like you said, that collaboration of students, like seeing, but also you feel that the world needs.
Yeah, I feel like the world needs it. Like these last 2 or 3 years, I've seen really good teachers that we wanted come into our building. We got them into our building, and after a year or two, they're out. And when I say they're out, they're working for...
They're not teaching anymore.
Correct. They're working for a freight company. They're working for somebody with a PhD in education or somebody.
I know a lot of those people.
Right.
I know amazing people that are teachers that are... They don't want to be anymore.
No. And
growing... And being a teacher in Crown Point, Indiana should not be like that.
No.
It's a great place to live. Yeah. It's a great school. It's safe, like all that stuff. It shouldn't be that way.
But the other side of it is the economic side of it, right?
For sure.
I'm closer to retirement.
Yeah.
There's a pension involved. There's a retirement. If I were to walk away, that's gone.
Sure.
So there's part of that grabs me and locks me in. So if I were completely standing up for what I believe is right, I would just go, this is not right. I'm gone.
Yeah.
And the devil may care. Whatever happens. It'll figure itself out. But I can't. I'm the father of 2 boys and a husband to a wife. Mm-hmm. And I think, the people that you're surrounded by really influence and should influence the people that are closest to you that you love, should influence the decisions you make, not just verbally, but just because you love them. And so sometimes, like, there are days I look at my wife and I say, I'm just going to give it up. I'm just going to give it up. And she's like, you are? Okay, this is fun. What are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go work at a bank. And I'm going to be the brand or marketer. I'm going to spin this in a new way, or I'm going to go work for a hospital, or I'm going to go, whatever the case might be. And then you kind of realize the stress that could bring on everyone. And you just go, well, this isn't it. This, I'm going to find another way to hold that mark. And so, I believe, like you say, we have a really strong school system in this town. It's growing. Mm-hmm. The city's growing. There is so much opportunity. Look at that building. I mean, what that building is going to be. And there are incredible teachers that are in that building that are doing life work, that are having. And so I believe that's still where I'm being called to right now. I believe that's like where my compass is pointing to. And I'm going to try and give. I kind of had that moment right before coming to see you. I had a student who hasn't been doing a lot of good work. And I was in a hurry and I had a million things going on, and he raised his hand. He said, can you just take a look at my project really quick? And I came over and it was 180 from the work he'd been doing. And I just thought, is this real? Or did he just what happened? Right. And so I'm having a conversation with myself over at my computer, taking attendance, saying, did this kid just get it? How did he get it? What happens? And then as I was driving there, I thought, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the kid got it. And if this changes his life. And then I heard him talking to his friend, and he's like, man, you're pretty good at this. And he said, yeah, well, this is what I want to do in college. And I was like, 5 minutes ago, if you would have asked me if this is a good career choice for me, if I was being honest, I probably would have said no. But now, because of one thing, I'd say, go for it, buddy.
Yeah, man.
Go get it.
Awesome.
And so if you could bring people, and that's the other thing, is that I feel like you, in a different way, I'm bringing people, I hope, to happiness and good fortune and good life. And sometimes the load is heavy, mm-hmm. and sometimes the load is light. But isn't that just with anything in this world?
100%.
Right? Being a dad,
100%.
Being a husband, all those things. You have to live in the in-between and not at the extremes. You have to live in the in-between. You have to live in the joy of the balance.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, get ready, because the balance, there's very little of it as they get older and you get deeper in this journey. Trying to balance out the seesaw becomes a lot harder.
For sure. That's kind of that's also where I wanted to take this conversation too, was on the dad side of things, being a newer dad and then growing our family. Because that's one of the places I think I also probably look up to you even more is on the dad side, because I've seen it. I also know your boys, and I can only hope that my kids are like your kids, man. So as and going to, from the perspective of first off, I know that for the last however many years, you probably sleep 2, 3, 4 hours. And I mean, how much do you sleep? Because you do so much, and you're a teacher who does a million other things for the good of all the people around you, like you just talked about. How many hours do you say you sleep?
So
are you getting better at it, please?
Okay, so this is what happened, right? Before the pandemic, it was very rare that I would ever be in bed before midnight and getting up at 5 or whatever in the morning, right? And then the pandemic happened and our lives shifted, and it was depressing time. And so I found myself sleeping in the middle of the day, an hour, 15 minutes, 20 minutes here and there. But then I was up all night working on stuff because we were trying to teach kids during the pandemic and they were at home and we were in quarantine. And I teach a media class that depends on technology and computer software and stuff. And they had nothing. So it was kind of an exciting time. When I look back, the first couple of weeks, months, my partner and I, Brent Barber, we were okay, how are we going to keep teaching this at home? And, we did a survey. Does everybody have a smartphone? We didn't even know that. Can you imagine? I didn't even know if every kid, and why would I ever think to ask? But does everybody have a smart device? They did. Whew. Okay, how many people are iPhones? How many people are Androids? Okay, what's the software that they can edit on their phone for iPhones? iMovie. What's the one? So during that time, I didn't sleep very much, and I was doing a lot of remote stuff that the school has asked me to do to make virtual videos for all the way up to graduation. Then I got COVID, and
That's actually a good thing to talk about. I mean, you have a crazy story with COVID.
Yeah, I mean,
to take a tangent, but
yeah, we came back from the quarantine, and we were back in school, and I could tell you the day that I got it and how I got it, but needless to say, about 4, 5, 6 days later, I had horrible symptoms, and so that Saturday, my wife said, "You need to go get tested." And I thought I had like a bad cough and stuff like that. So I went and got tested, and it came back positive. I called, my boss at school, and he said, "Okay, man, you're in quarantine. Hey, what do you think? Do you think you could teach from home?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." So Monday was Martin Luther King Day, and on Tuesday we were back in school. So I called my partner, and he said, I'll get you all set up here in the classroom. So I was in, and I was in bed, and I was talking, and I was coughing. I barely made it through one class. I said, "I don't think I'm gonna be able to do this." Next day, my breathing went down, all the way up until Thursday. My blood oxygen level was high 70s, which it should be like 92 to 99. And it was in the high 70s, and you can go to, lots of damage can be done. So my wife put me in the back of our van and went to the emergency room. They diagnosed me, and I went into quarantine isolation on a high flow oxygen. And needless to say, when you're away from your family at the darkest moment of your life, and you cannot have contact with them, a lot of despair kicks in. Like, this is it. This is the end, and I'm not going to get to see them before I go. And no matter how much oxygen they were kicking, none of it was enough. And then they started putting so much in that my lungs weren't moving, and it was just and it started tearing at it, and I had pneumonia. And then so I started getting these pneumothoraxes, which are tears in the lungs. And then they, were going to put a tube in, and then I'm being raced to intensive care. And so, it's not a fun story, but the end of it was such that the day they were going to put the tube in my lung, they do that by taking you a CAT scan, and the doctors look at the CAT scan, and they put this tube, the needle, and this thing goes right in, and they put me in the CAT scan, and I was sitting there, and they, that whole thing, you're in and out, and then I hear them talking behind the glass, and it's like 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes, and they finally comes over. He goes, "Mr. Gloff, we're gonna do another scan." They did it again. I hear them talking. I'm like, "What is going on?" So he comes over. He goes, "All right, listen. In the middle of the night last night, we did an X-ray of your lungs, and you had a large pneumothorax on your left side and a smaller one on your right side. And from that time until now, we noticed that they're starting to shrink." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he says, "They're starting to heal." I said, "In the middle of the night, it was a huge hole, and now it just started to shrink." He goes, "Why did it happen?" He goes, "We don't know." He goes, "It's COVID. We don't know anything about this." And I said, "Well, would it be better for you to put the tube in my lung anyway? Will that make me heal faster?" And he said, "I wouldn't want a tube in my lung. Do you?" And I said, "No," but I said, I'll take it. If you tell me that the tube in my lung will get me out of here in a few days, I'll do it." And he goes, "No, listen, go back up to your room, relax. Let's see if we can get you out of here as quickly as possible." I said, "Well, how long is that?" And so he's like, "Oh, just relax, just." So they take me up to the room, and as I was wheeling up to the room, I told myself, "I'm out of here in 7 days. I'm out of here in 7 days. I went back to my room. I said, "I'd like to have physical therapy come in and start working with me." And they're like, "Tomorrow's Saturday. There's not a lot of them around." And I said, "I need them here tomorrow. I need them here." I turned into one of those people, a total, Bob, the male equivalent of Karen. And I was like, I need to have somebody here. And they sent these 2 young, amazing people who were physical therapists, occupational therapists, and they came in. They got me out of bed. I couldn't walk but 10 steps. I was breathing. And I didn't care. And they're like, "We're going to take you back to your bed." I'm like, "No, let's keep going." And I just kept pushing it. And on the 6th day, the doctor came to see me, and he goes, "You want to go home?" And I said, "Yeah." And that Saturday was Valentine's Day. This time of year, like I go, this is the day I was diagnosed with COVID. This is the day I went in the hospital. And I used to hate this time of year. I love Christmas so much. I hate January and February. I love this time of year.
No.
It is like a holiday for me to remember how lucky I was.
And 2 years later, you're in the best shape of your life.
Yeah, I feel, pretty good. So yeah, I think, all of that kind of parlays into the sleep. So when I got home, I said, I'm going to take better care of myself. And I made it a point, 10 o'clock every night I was in bed. Well, you know how life is, right? In the midst of turmoil, you get on your hands and your knees and you're like, I'll do anything. I'll change my life. I'll stop doing this. I'll stop doing that. And then you get healthy and things work out. And then 2 years, you're back to your same lifestyle. And that's kind of what's been happening to me. But really, to be honest with you, the reason is more of because my son is he's at this point. It's not just work. I mean, work is always busy and it's always going to be, listen to me, there's never going to be a shortage of work, but I can manage that. Right. But when your kid's on the precipice of starting the next phase of their journey, and this one is one in which I will not be there to walk him through it, you want to make sure he gets it right. And that's probably a thing I'm incredibly guilty of. And everybody who is close to me will say that, that I'm a control freak and that I always want to make, even my students, like, I'm like, here, let me help you do that. Let me help you do it. And so what I'm trying to do is, and my wife, we're trying to say, this is getting closer and closer where he's got to do this. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that you're not up late at night helping with college applications and scholarship.
But it's better than it was.
It is. Last night was not. Last night was, I've got a bunch of stuff coming up competition-wise and outside of school and whatnot, professional stuff. I'm teaching at a college on Saturdays. And so I just bit the bullet and said, I'm going to be up tonight. And I think I got like got into bed 2:30, 3 o'clock and whatever.
I was halfway through us talking. I was like, this is a terrible first impression of you because I'm asking these because usually, like you said, you thought we were going to laugh for an hour. And here we are being, I thought we were going to quote. I'm sorry.
No, I thought we were going to quote Anchorman
all day,
the entire time.
All day. No one can quote Anchorman all night. Mm-hmm. But that just warrants a second podcast. That's all it means.
The next one's just all the jokes.
It's just nothing but BS. The one thing for me is there's a lot of I think the people who do watch are mostly people that are around my age.
Sure.
Maybe a little bit older, give or take, a little bit younger. But a lot of people either have young kids or are in the process of doing it. So you have raised two incredible boys. I don't think I've ever met, and obviously your little guy's age, was he 8?
He's 8.
8. Yeah. So, but Christopher's 17?
17.
Jeez. So Christopher is one of these, if not the most impressive kid I've ever met. He's not a kid anymore, but from the time he was little to now, I've never been more impressed. I've never met a kid that is anywhere near as respectful, as sharp, as kind, as he's just an all-around unbelievable kid. What is your advice as a parent and as a father to raising kids? And even so in today's day and age, what's your advice to raising kids? Because you and Mrs. Gloff have done an unbelievable job.
Yeah, my advice would be make sure you're married to a really good mother.
That's probably my advice too.
Right? No, it's just like because of the things that I am, right? And I'm not saying that she's perfect, but she's the balance. Where I can get really crazy and obsess about things. Mm-hmm. She's the one that kind of pulls it back. I remember years ago, I'm a competitive person. When I played sports and when I coach, I'm competitive. And I don't know if I don't know that I've ever looked back and thought about how many wins or losses or in any of those things that I've ever done. But I know that I used to think that in the moment there was more to be learned in winning than there was in losing. If you lost, you failed, and I didn't see the potential in learning from failure. But anyway, I was fixated on winning and the end result. And my wife one day, Kristen, said, you have to remember that when you're coaching at these levels, and really it should be for every level, that it's about the process and not the end result. I think the same can be said about child raising, right? I've lost focus of that many times. And I also want to be clear in my guilt over anyone ever thinking that what we have is perfect. It is not. He is a lot of the things, our oldest is a lot of the things that you say he is, but he's a human being and he makes a number of mistakes, as I make a number of mistakes. And our relationship is incredibly complicated at times because he has this dad that people see as one way or as students see him as one way. And he doesn't see me that way all the time. He sees me in my pajamas at home, and my hair disheveled and a 5 o'clock shadow. And
it's good luck for you.
Yeah, it's, and so I think, I want to be clear that there is no sense of perfection in any of this. And I don't want to mislead people into that. However, with that being said, I wish I could even say that it's about good modeling, because that I am not. I am not the best modeler of the best behavior and the best things to say and do at times. I think what it really exists at the heart of this, and it goes back to what we were saying about teaching and about this world, right? It comes down to love. I think if you asked him to make a list, if you asked either of my kids, and Chase may not get this because he's too young still, but if you were to ask them, like, what are all of the things people think about your dad that they got wrong? He'd be able to give you a pretty good list. But if they say, what's the one thing you would say about your dad that absolutely? I believe, and I hope, that he would say, he loves me more than anything. Because, I was lucky to have parents that made me feel that way. They were not perfect, and we weren't always on the right side of the road together, but I knew that they loved me more than anything. They would give up everything for me. And I think that our kids feel that way. I have never asked them that, but my perception of the situation is that's the thing that it comes down to. I don't model enough good things for them. I don't practice what I preach. It's often so much easier for me to say, do as I say and not as I do. But I think at the end of the day that he knows, and he's got the security of knowing that he's got two people in this world. And if he thinks I love him, I can't imagine what he thinks about my wife, because my wife is the most loving mother to her kids. And I don't even know if I've ever said that to her, but she is. She has way more patience than I do. She knows what to say when I don't. Mm-hmm. And I just think having that security takes the load off a bit, right? It allows us to carry the yoke a little bit, and it allows him to say, you know what, if I fall, they're going to catch me. So I'm going to try something here. And maybe once in a while they pick up on, they smile a lot. They laugh a lot. They he's irreverent. My oldest is irreverent. And sometimes we're like, oh, but he gets it from us, because that's what he hears us saying, and our friends. But at the end of the day, we think that, he'll be kind and nice to people, and he'll appreciate that, and he'll appreciate opportunities. And that's the other thing, when you can, you try to provide as much opportunity as you can for them. Is there a point of overdoing it? Yeah. I mean, you give them too much, and we've certainly been guilty of that. Then they take it for granted, and there's that opportunity. But you hope, I remember talking when my kids were real young, and I was teaching kids who had parents that were ready to graduate from Andrean and Crown Point. And I'll just say, what's that like, and how much insecurity, like I was already starting to ball up with anxiety about what it would be like to let them go. And they say, you have to do the very best. And in nurturing them and guiding them. But when it's time to go, you got to let them go, and you got to hope that you did your job. And if you did, they're going to be okay. And that I think is my greatest wish for both those boys, is that whatever happens from here on out, they're going to be okay. And that people who are around them are going to be okay too.
I'm just thinking about my daughter. That's all. It's hard, man. Thinking about like that time. It's like 16 years from now, which will fly like nothing.
That.
And because I love that little girl more than anything on this whole freaking planet.
Yeah.
But that was good advice. Noah, you ready to be a dad now?
No. It brings a lot with it.
What's our time? We're probably the longest that we've been so far. So an hour?
We're over an hour.
What are we at? Hour what? We're going to need a second one. I think, but honestly though, I'm happy the first show is doing this though, because I really think that when I was thinking about it today, I was thinking about what would be the biggest value to people. You, more than anybody, know how to make people laugh. You know how to make people have a good time.
I like to do that.
But what you've done for me is this type of stuff, right? So I wanted to show a little bit more and like hear more of your philosophies on being, because I just can't say enough about, and the people who know you and your wife and the people who've had an impact from you, the biggest thing is these types of things. Like, you're the person that's there as a teacher, right? When things are not, like, how many times have you been sitting in your office where you've had to have life and death type of conversations with kids, or major type of decisions with kids? And how many of those kids still to this day have grown up into young men and women who still call you to this day, like me? So the impact that you've had on people, I wanted to show, one, the impact that a teacher can have on somebody, on a student, because it's done it from everything that I've gone through. I think about, a lot of the things that you've done to impact me in those ways. Being like all the way down to being, 21 years old and you calling me for the process of your buying and selling, and that, like, the fact that was even an option, that I was even an option at that age is crazy. That's a huge impact. But all the other things that you did to me leading up, I wanted to show that, like, because it's a very difficult time to be a teacher. And if there's benefit that you can give to people thinking about doing that, but also highlight the fact that you are teachers, had all this impact, and you as teachers need and deserve that. That's also it. But I really think just like the biggest thing was just the value that you can bring from your philosophies. And I think that at an early, like, you still have a lot of life left. There's still so much that you've done and accomplished in a short period of time, but in all the way down to keeping the main thing, right? Keeping that on your wall in the office, and it's crazy,
still
right?
There, yeah.
And so I would, I think maybe leading up, because we will do another one that is more fun and enjoyable.
Way more
fun. We can BS a little bit and have some fun and talk about all. But leading into today, I thought the biggest value people could get was some of your philosophies on life. Because if I look at your life from outside looking in as somebody who is close enough to you, I think, to at least make this call. First off, I think you've lived a very full, amazing life. And I also think that that you've just done so much for the people around you. So what, I had something else there and I lost it, but ending off, what would you say are some of, like, you can even go to the main thing, but like, what are some of your biggest life philosophies? We can end off with that. We could have some more fun, another one, but like, what are some of your biggest life philosophies for teaching people how to live a full, because I feel like you've lived a very great, fulfilling life. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I feel like I feel the most well-rounded. That's why I call you a life mentor. Yeah. Because if I look at your life, I feel like if my life is anything like yours, I'll be unbelievably happy.
Well, be careful what you wish for. I think the key is, like, who we spend time with, and there's all sorts of silly quotes, right? I can give you a ton. Like, I can quote Frederick Buechner and I can Ava DuVernay and say these things. But at the end of the day, what I've learned from this journey so far is that the people you're surrounded with, how you treat them and they treat you, and that they know that you love them right? Like I don't walk into my classroom and tell my kids I love them. Once in a while I do. You know, the other day I said it in an odd way. There were some students that just weren't getting it done. And I said, listen to me, I love you guys. Like and hopefully the feeling's mutual. And I'm assuming that it is, because you've taken my class 2-3 years in a row, but like you've stopped producing and learning here. And so if you want to just be around me, like you could come in every day before school, you come in after school, you come in during lunch, but like, let's not fool each other and have you in here because, you know, you just want to be with me for this period, but do nothing. And I said, you know, we've got to have a balance here. So I do say that once in a while to them, but I think more important than saying it is that they know it. Like, you know, I probably had 22 guys from the baseball team, all levels, stop in today to talk to me about something. Yesterday I spent part of a day talking to a kid who was thinking about no longer playing baseball into staying with baseball. And I actually said this. I said, look, I'm not here to talk you into it. What I'm here to do is say, I don't want you to lose out on an opportunity. That's the same thing I would say to my son.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that if we start to look at other people the way we would our parents are, and that's tough to do. I mean, sometimes people don't give us a lot of help in doing that, right? But I think the more that we can slow down and experience and have some empathy for where people are and kind of take on and say, okay, you're in a tough spot, man. But I love you. You're a good person. And I don't mean that in a cliched hippie way. That is an effect that my wife has had on me, is that those hippie qualities. But I don't mean it in that way. I mean it in, like, I genuinely care about people.
Yeah.
And it's hard to care about everyone. It really, I can't stress that enough. I hope that people don't and go, you know, is that really what he thinks? Because it's a daily struggle. It's an hourly struggle. But I truly believe in my heart that if we viewed and valued people like that in this world, that is the main thing, man. That is the main thing. And that boils over into our family and into our relationships and with our kids and our friendships and the students and the people we work with, right? Those are the things. And the other thing is, I haven't been poor, and I've certainly not been wealthy, but I have valued what we've had. And I've been very lucky. Some of it has come upon us because of hard work, the things that we have, and some of it has come upon us out of some good circumstances, and some of it has come out of life's toughest moments. But I'm grateful for what we have. And I think that if we can kind of look at life in a perception of gratitude, it changes everything. It changes everything, because if I'm grateful for what I have and happy for what I have, I want people to have that same thing. And it's easier. I think it's easier for the human soul to love when you're coming from a place of gratitude rather than a place of regret.
That's yeah. That's what in our logo. That's what that's about. Because I thankfully had a lot of people to learn that from. I still don't think I really understand it. You know what I mean?
I don't either.
But I'm trying. So to wrap up, I would just say that thank you for everything, man. And we're gonna have one that's more fun. We're gonna have some good times. We'll joke around. We'll laugh, because this. Like, I know, for how well I know you, I'm literally sitting here thinking, I'm like, there was not a lot of one-off one-liners and like we did, but I don't know, and it's weird saying this like as one of your students and like someone just like that looks up to you like in a dad way, but I mean, I'm very grateful for you, but you also, I don't know how many people tell you, but you should be proud of everything that you've done, man. Like, thank you for everything, man.
Hey, Paul did a pretty good job himself.
I love my dad, man. My dad's the man. We need to get Paul on here one day.
Yeah.
He'd have fun. But hey, thanks, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.